I want to share with you this afternoon my favorite story from the whole collection of the museum, and that is the tale of the sinking of the steamship Tarpon. The ship, the Tarpon, was a freighter that was built out with 16 passenger cabins, and that ship came to Carrabelle every Thursday from 1902 to 1937 when it sank. And it was on a trip to Carrabelle from Mobile, where it was berthed, on September 2nd, 1937. And a Category 3 hurricane struck when the ship was halfway between Pensacola and Panama City. It wasn't like in modern times when we have a lot of warning. It just, all of a sudden it was raining. The ship had everything that could go wrong on a ship in a storm happen. It got struck by lightning, the cargo shifted, punched a hole in the hull. They could not move the cargo because it was so tightly packed. There were other things that happened. The fire in the engine room finally reached the engine, and it just blew up. The ship cracked open and it sank 6 miles off the sea buoy at Panama City. So as a result of that, of the 31 people that were on board, there were only 13 survivors. Those people were all floating around in the wreckage, trying to find something that floated that they could hold on to. Some people would hold on to the mast or to the hatch cover, or even to boxes of produce just to keep them, to add. Everybody had on a life jacket, but still it was very hard to stay in the water without something else to hold on to. So they're all in there, and there's the youngest guy, Addley Baker, was a young 25-year-old oiler who'd only been on the ship a couple of years. Very optimistic, very positive, had a brand new baby at home, and everything to live for. And Addley says, "Okay, guys, what are we going to do to save ourselves?" And the old guy said, "There's nothing. We're just going to watch each other die or get eaten by sharks." So Addley says, "No, I'm going for help." They said, "Addley, you don't even have a compass. You don't know which way north is." So there Addley is in the water. He looks around at the horizon, and only in one spot does he see a sand dune. So he declares that is where Panama City is, and he begins to organize himself to go on to swim to go get help. He reaches into the crates of produce that are floating in the water with him, puts some apples in his shirt, and he starts swimming towards that sand dune. And his thinking was that from in the water, the horizon is generally 6 to 8 miles away, and that he could swim that far. So he paced himself. He began to swim. He did fine. He got 6 or 8 miles. But he noticed that the sand dune didn't appear to be getting closer. It just seemed like it was getting bigger. But he kept swimming. Now, while he was gone, the guys back at the wreckage are trying to figure out what they can do to make themselves less vulnerable. Two of the big stevedores that were there on the ship actually took a hatch cover and began using it like a boogie board and started kicking themselves towards the same direction that Addley had gone in. But meanwhile, Addley doesn't know that. He's back there swimming away. He gets about 10 miles and he starts to get muscle cramps. And when he does, he begins to drown. And it's the sound of Addley drowning that attracts a pod of dolphins that came and saved him from drowning. And then they just held him up in the water like they do their babies sometimes. They held him up in the water until he came to and was able to take charge of himself again. And so once Addley started swimming again, they just stayed with him, but they kind of backed off. And Addley went on until he began to get tired. And when he got tired the second time, the dolphins just took charge of him. And they got on either side of him, and they began to direct where he was swimming. And those dolphins took him to the only place on shore where there were any other human beings. And he crawled out on the beach right where two guys were surveying for a new road. And they're out there surveying the 2 days after a hurricane. And they saw Addley, put him in their truck, took him into town to the police chief. And the police chief teletyped over to the Coast Guard in Pensacola, told them about the shipwreck. Addley thought it was close to the sea buoy, so they sent a plane over. They found the wreck, determined that there were still survivors. They sent the latitude longitude by teletype back to the police in Panama City, who sent fishing boats to get the rest of the folks. So with the help of Addley being brave and the divine intervention from the dolphins, they were able to save the remaining survivors of the steamship Tarpon wreck.